Hello, everyone. Welcome to our peer-to-peer session, an editor's advice to writers with Ralph Hickok. My name is Hendrik Hernandez-Resto. I am the creative specialist at New Bedford Creative. Thank you for having us today, and thank you for joining us. This peer-to-peer session is geared to enrich, educate, and connect creatives within our community. New Bedford is the home of artists, creatives, changemakers, designers, entrepreneurs, and community enthusiasts, and peer-to-peer sessions embraces the pulse that makes New Bedford so unique while also expanding our knowledge and connections. New Bedford Creative offers many opportunities for artists and cultural organizations. Join our creative directory, apply to one of our grants or call for arts, list your event on our calendar, all for free at our website, newbedfordcreative.org. Peer-to-peer sessions is supported in part by the City of New Bedford through its American Rescue Plan Award and Arts, Culture, and Tourism Fund, facilitated by New Bedford Creative at the New Bedford Economic Development Council. We would like to thank Mayor John Mitchell, his administration, and the entire New Bedford City Council for their continued support of the creative sector. This is just one component of a broader initiative to boost arts-based economic development and help the creative sector recover from the pandemic. Before I introduce our presenter, I want to go over the format of this session. Once I'm done, I will pass it over to Ralph. Once Ralph is finished, we will open up for Q&A. I will review the questions in the chat first, and then we can continue with our Q&A live. We will have about 20 minutes for questions so we can wrap up on time by 2 p.m. Just so everyone is aware, this session will be recorded. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat so we don't miss them when we open up for Q&A. Most sessions throughout the series have been recorded and can be found on our YouTube channel at New Bedford Creative in the following week. I would like to introduce our guest speaker, writer and editor Ralph Hickok, who will share their expertise on how to improve your writing skills. Now I'll pass it over to Ralph to share more details about who he is and what he will present us with today. Go for it, Ralph. I am muting myself.
Okay, thank you, Hendrik, and welcome everybody. I'm just going to tell you a little about my background before I get into the meat and potatoes. I started making money as a writer at the age of 14 when I got a summer job at my hometown newspaper, filling in for reporters when they went on vacation. I did that for 5 summers, the last 3 summers of my high school career and the first 2 summers of college. And almost every job I've had since then has involved working with words. When I was in college, I had part-time jobs as a proofreader at a Boston publishing company and as a student writer at the Harvard News Office. After college, I went back into the newspaper business as a reporter in Gloucester, sports editor in Ohio, and Sunday magazine editor for the New Bedford Standard Times. Then I became chief copywriter for Southeastern Advertising Agency in downtown New Bedford. At the time, it was the largest ad agency in Massachusetts outside of Boston. For the last 25 years, I've been a freelance writer and editor. I've written several books about sports history and biography, and I've edited more than 100 books in that time. Speaking of books, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of them that aim to teach you how to become a good writer, and some of them may actually be helpful. They're all written by writers and they focus on what you should do. I am a writer, but I'm also an editor, and as an editor, I think I can help writers become better by focusing on what not to do and how to avoid some common mistakes. These are mistakes I see all the time when I edit articles, stories, papers, and books by a variety of writers. My advice falls into 3 categories. Spellcheck is your frenemy. Use the right word and don't get fancy. First, spellcheck is your frenemy. Personally, I'm not bothered by spelling mistakes. One of my favorite writers, Jane Austen, in her 41 plus years, never learned how to spell friend correctly. Another favorite, Scott Fitzgerald, was known for his poor spelling. One of my best friends when I was a kid, Kenny, was a terrible speller. And when I say terrible, I mean unbelievably bad. Here's an example. He had to spell gypsy once. I don't remember why. Now, gypsy can be spelled Gypsy or Gipsy, but he didn't even come close. He spelled it Jupise. Kenny was also one of the most intelligent people I've ever known. He graduated from college summa cum laude, went on to get his PhD, and became a college professor. He was recognized as an expert on how to teach children to read. He wrote several books, conducted major studies, and was a consultant of the Rockefeller Foundation. So I don't believe spelling problems say anything about a person's intelligence, but to many people, a misspelled word is a red flag that says something like, someone who spells that badly can't be a very good writer. If you're a bad speller, you probably know it, and you're probably careful about using Spellcheck. Of course, Spellcheck can be your friend for obvious reasons, but it can also be your enemy by giving you a false sense of security when you use the wrong word and Spellcheck doesn't notice. This commonly happens with homophones, which are words that sound alike but are spelled differently. For example, the rights of man, RIGHTS, are not the same as the rights of spring, RITES. The big problem with this kind of error is that it makes a very bad impression on many readers and on editors at magazines and publishing houses. There's one I see a lot, even from good writers who are good at spelling. Lead, spelled Lead, lead, also spelled Lead, and lead, spelled Led. This is a very tricky trio of words. The first two are spelled the same but pronounced differently. The last two are spelled differently but pronounced the same. The second one isn't related at all to the other two, even though it's spelled the same as one and pronounced the same as the other. Oh, by the way, the lead spelled LED is not to be confused with LED, all capitals, which is an abbreviation for light emitting diode. Lead, spelled LED, is the past tense of lead. So if you lead a parade today, for example, tomorrow you can say, I led a parade. Again, that's spelled LED. But I see a lot of writers using LEAD instead, and Spellcheck won't notice. That's just one example of how homophones can make life difficult for writers. There are literally hundreds of them. I'm just going to mention the ones I see most often as an editor. Here's another tricky trio that causes more problems than it should. The three theirs. There, THERE, is a place that isn't here. For example, I saw a robin over there. There, THEIR, is a possessive indicating something that belongs to them. For example, parents naturally want to help their children. Finally, there, THEY''RE, is a contraction of they are. For example, they're all going to be sorry. I can't think of any easy way to remember which is which. If you know you have a problem with this tricky trio, I suggest you simply look for each instance of any one of these words in your writing and make sure you use the right one. The two yours, Y-O-U-R and Y-O-U''RE, are similar to the theirs in that one of them is a possessive and the other is a contraction. The four-letter version, Y-O-U-R, is the possessive, of course. It's the possessive of you, so it indicates anything that belongs to you, your car, your home, your shoes, your jeans. The one with the apostrophe has to be the contraction because a contraction always contains an apostrophe to mark the spot where one or more letters have been removed. Your is a contraction of you are, so the apostrophe comes after the you to replace the missing A. Here's a similar duo, two little three-letter words with the same three letters in the same order, but one of them has an apostrophe. It's, ITS, and it's, IT, apostrophe S. Here's one of those little tricks the English language likes to play on us. We're taught that the possessive is formed by adding an apostrophe S to a word. Ralph's hat, Diane's hat, and so forth. So obviously IT apostrophe S is the possessive, right? Wrong. The apostrophe is also used in contractions, as I've just mentioned. An apostrophe S replaces is or has in many of them. For example, she's tired instead of she is tired, and he's gone to the store, or he has gone to the store. And IT apostrophe S is a contraction, not a possessive. It means it is, as in it's a contraction. The possessive is ITS without the apostrophe. For example, the cat ate its food. A similar problem arises with whose, WHO apostrophe S, and whose, WHOSE. Again, the apostrophe S version is the contraction, meaning who is, while the WHOSE version is the possessive form. Incidentally, I think mistakes with words like this are often simply typing errors, especially for fast touch typists like me. The brain knows how to spell the word, but the fingers have a mind of their own. Here are two words that are pronounced the same and almost spelled the same: complement with an I and complement with an E. They're probably seen most often in the adjective form complimentary. Compliment with an I means to praise something. An easy way to remember that is that a compliment often begins with I. For example, I really like your hairdo. The adjective form, complimentary, remember with an I, can mean free of charge, as in complimentary peanuts at a bar or complimentary tickets given to employees of a theater. Incidentally, the reason for this usage is that small free gifts like this are often said to be presented with the compliments of the giver. Compliment with an E means something additional, something that fits, something that helps complete something else. For example, the white wine perfectly complements the fish entree. The word can also be used as a noun. To rephrase the previous example, the white wine is the perfect complement to the fish entree. Here's a way to remember that this is complement with an E. It helps to complete something, and complete, of course, is spelled with an E after the L. Two words are pronounced break. They both contain the same letters, but in a different order. BRAKE refers to the device used to slow or stop an automobile. I deliberately use the word automobile instead of car because it starts with an A. That's a reminder that the A comes first in BRAKE. It's often used in the plural, as in, she hit the brakes to avoid running over the dog. BREAK can be a verb or a noun implying some kind of interruption or disruption. You can break something, like a cup of, or a plate or a leg, or you can take a break. The two forms of capital cause a lot of confusion, not only because they sound the same and are spelled almost the same, but also because their meanings are similar. Capital with an L at the end with an AL at the end is a city that's a seat of government for a state or nation. Boston is the capital of Massachusetts. Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States. Capital with OL at the end is a building where a legislature meets. For example, the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. is home to the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives. A way to remember this is that capital with OL at the end often has a dome, and the O in dome should remind you that the word is spelled with OL. One mistake that I've seen several times recently involves rain, not R-A-I-N, that water that falls from the sky, but confusion between R-E-I-N and R-E-I-G-N. A rein, spelled R-E-I-N, is the long, thin strap connected to a bit. It's used to control a horse or other animal. If you give someone free rein, it means you're not controlling them. Therefore, they can do whatever they want. As a verb, it's usually used with in to mean getting someone or something under control. For example, we have to rein in our spending. I often see writers using the R-E-I-G-N version of rein in this context. This kind of reining is what a king or queen does. The G is the tip-off. Remember that regal has G as a reminder of which kind of rein this is. Two words are pronounced discrete. One of them has a double E, D-I-S-C-R-E-E-T. The other is spelled D-I-S-C-R-E-T-E. If you want to use discrete in your writing, you almost certainly want to use the word with the double E. It basically means cautious or careful. For example, please be discreet about this. Don't tell anyone else. Or I have to be discreet in my line of work. I can't just act on my first impulse. The other discrete, the one spelled D-I-S-C-R-E-T-E, means separate or distinct, and it's more often used in scientific or mathematical contexts. For example, discrete variables are counted using integers, or the patient passed through several discrete stages of illness before finally recovering. Then we have everyday and everyday. Not only do they sound exactly the same, they're spelled exactly the same, but one of them is one word and the other is two words. As one word, everyday is an adjective that means common or usual. You put on your everyday clothes. That doesn't mean you actually wear them every single day, but it does mean that it's what you usually wear, as opposed to what you wear for special occasions. As two words, every day means, well, each and every day. If you drink coffee every morning of each day this week, you drink coffee every day, two words. Now we have peak, peak, and peak. I know you can't hear the difference, but there are three different spellings. Let's take them in alphabetical order. P-E-A-K as a noun means the top, the highest point, as in the peak of Mount Everest. As a verb, it means to reach a high point, as in sales peaked at $12 million a day. P-E-E-K, double E, means a quick look or a glance. For example, here's a sneak peek at our new product. Then there's the real outlier, the exotic version, P-I-Q-U-E. It looks like PIQ, but it's also pronounced peak, and it means to arouse or excite, especially when used with interest or curiosity. For example, the advertisement piqued my interest in the product, or what you said about her piqued my curiosity. This version of pique can also mean to irritate or annoy. She was piqued by his lack of curiosity. Remember, this is P-I-Q-U-E. Now we come to the two principles. The one that ends in P-A-L is usually an adjective that means something like the first or most important. As a noun, it means a leader or chief. The person now known as the principal of the school, where principal is a noun, was once called the school's principal teacher, where it's an adjective. Here are a couple of sentences to help you remember. The principal of the school is a pal of mine, and my best friend is my principal pal, where the word pal represents the last three letters of the word. Principle with a PLE ending is always a noun, and it means a fundamental belief or law. For example, first, do no harm is a basic principle of medicine. I see the two versions of dual being mixed up quite often. Dual, D-U-A-L, has a sense of two or double, as in he has a dual personality, or his plans had a dual purpose. In duel, D-U-E-L, the two are engaged in combat or contest of some kind. It could be an old-fashioned duel with words, or it might be a more cerebral duel of wits. The two words pronounced phase are rather odd because they're spelled so differently. They have just two letters in common, both vowels, A in the middle and silent E at the end. The verb phase is spelled exactly as it sounds, F-A-Z-E. It means to bother or disturb, and it's most often used in the negative. For example, because of her experience as a nurse, she wasn't fazed by the sight of blood. Replace the F with PH and the Z with S, and we have phase, P-H-A-S-E. As a noun, it means a stage or distinct period in some sort of process or symptom system. For example, the moon goes through various phases every month, or we are entering a new phase in human history. Phase, P-H-A-S-E, can also be a verb meaning to do something in steps or stages. It's often used with in or out, as in the higher retirement age will be phased in over a 3-year period, and the company plans to phase out that product line by the end of the year. The two words pronounced jibe are spelled almost the same, but their meanings are quite different. One starts with a G and the other begins with J. Jibe with G means to make a taunting or mocking remark, as in his opponent was constantly jibing. As a noun, it means that kind of remark, as in he tried to ignore his opponent's constant jibes. Jibe with a J, on the other hand, means to agree or match. His story jibed perfectly with what I had been told by other people. Incidentally, sometimes both these jibes get confused with jive, J-I-V-E, which is a totally different word. Two versions of mantle are also spelled almost the same. One ends in L-E and the other ends in E-L. The L-E version, M-A-N-T-L-E, is the shelf above a fireplace. We have framed family photos over a mantle. If it's spelled M-A-N-T-E-L, it means a cloak or similar garment. She threw a mantle over her shoulders because of the cold. We saw some tricky trios earlier. Here's a really complex quartet. Strictly speaking, they may not be pronounced exactly the same by some people, but they sound so much alike that they're basically indistinguishable. Of course, I'm talking about metal, 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 and metal. They can be thought of as two pairs, two 5-letter words with a D in the middle of one and a T in the middle of the other, and two 6-letter words with two D's in the middle of one and two T's in the middle of the other. Let's start with MEDAL. It's an award for outstanding achievement, originally military, but now often given for accomplishments in other fields, an Olympic medal, for example. It's usually shaped like a coin and made out of metal, M-E-T-A-L. So it's not surprising that these two words often get mistaken for one another. The 6-letter double D word is M-E-D-D-L-E, which means to interfere with someone else's business. For example, I don't want him meddling in our affairs. If we replace those D's with T's, we get metal, which means M-E-T-T-L-E, which means courage or boldness, as in this was her chance to prove her mettle. Here's a tricky trio that I see causing a lot of confusion, the 3 palates. Palate, P-A-L-A-T-E, has to do with the mouth, which contains a hard palate and a soft palate. It's more often used to mean the sense of taste. as in white wine with fish is pleasing to the palate. Palette, P-A-L-E-T-T-E, is the board, usually with a thumb hole, that artists use to hold their paint. This word is often used figuratively to mean the colors used by a painter. Her palette is heavy with earth tones. Pallet, P-A-L-L-E-T, now usually means the wooden platform that's used to store or move various materials. It can also refer to a makeshift bed, as in he went to sleep on a pallet of old burlap bags. Another trio of words beginning with P often causes confusion. A pedal, P-A-D-A-L, is something that's operated with the foot. A brake pedal in a car, the pedals on a bicycle, a piano's pedals. As a verb, it means to operate such a pedal. Someone pedals a bike, for example. This one should be easy to remember because there are so many PED words that have something to do with the foot. Bipeds are creatures that have 2 feet. A pedometer counts how many steps your feet take. A pedestrian is someone who travels by foot, not by automobile. Change the D to a T and you have P-E-T-A-L, the colored leaf on a flower. Finally, we have peddle, P-E-D-D-L-E, which means trying to sell something. The original peddlers traveled around selling small articles that they carried with them. And yes, the PED part does come from the fact that they were on foot. When we use it nowadays, it's often with the implication that there's something shady about it. For example, you can't peddle that crap around here. I'm going to close this section with a real biggie. Sight, S-I-G-H-T, and sight, S-I-T-E. I say it's a real biggie because I see these words being confused very often. The 5-letter word S-I-G-H-T has to do with vision, seeing. If you lose your sight, you're blind. It's also something that you see, as in, that's quite a sight. If you're a tourist, you probably want to see the sights, maybe even go sightseeing. The 4-letter word S-I-T-E is a place or location where something such as a building or a city or a monument is or was located. For example, the site of the Empire State Building is on the west side of 5th Avenue between West 33rd and 34th Streets. We see it most often today in the word website. Remember, that's the 4-letter word, S-I-T-E. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it spelled incorrectly as S-I-G-H-T in website, or how many times I've seen S-I-T-E in the word sightseeing. I should add that there's another word pronounced sight. It's spelled C-I-T-E, and it means to quote or mention something. He cited Hamlet's famous to be or not to be speech as an example of a soliloquy, or she cited many occasions on which her husband lied to her. I thought I should mention this third version of sight, but I don't remember ever seeing it being confused with the other two. Use the right word is the subject of the second part. It's similar to the first part, except that I'm going to be talking about words that are often confused with one another, even though they aren't pronounced the same. I'm going to start with lose and loose. Lose, with just one O, is a verb that means you no longer have something. You can lose all sorts of things: your mind, your temper, your wallet, your keys, your reputation, your phone, your glasses, almost anything. Loose, with 2 O's, is an adjective that means not attached or not fixed. The doorknob is loose, the dog got loose, my daughter has a loose tooth. The error I see a lot is loose being used instead of lose, though I don't remember ever seeing it the other way around. Here's a sentence to help you remember the right way. If you lose your dog, then it's loose. So the 1 O lose comes before the 2 O loose. Lie and lay form another problematical pair of L words. This is really tricky because not only do they have similar sounds, they represent similar ideas. If you lay yourself down, you are now lying down. Furthermore, the past tense of lie is lay. So while you lie down today, you lay down yesterday. You may remember learning about transitive and intransitive verbs somewhere along the line. A transitive verb has to have an object. For example, you can't just say I bring or I take. You have to bring or take something because those are transitive verbs. An intransitive verb doesn't require an object. It can stand alone. Lay is transitive, so you can't just lay down, but you can lay yourself down, or you can lay a blanket on the bed, or you can lay a book on the table. Lie is intransitive, so the blanket is lying on the bed, and the book is lying on the table, and you are lying down. Here's a way to help you keep these words straight. Lie is spelled with an I, which stands for intransitive. Comprise is frequently misused for compose in sentences like, a basketball team is comprised of 5 players. If you insist on using comprise, use it like this. A basketball team comprises 5 players. Better yet, use compose. A basketball team is composed of 5 players. Here are 2 words that are similar in appearance and sound. Continual and continuous. They're similar in meaning too, but you should pay attention to the difference. Continuous means something that goes on and on without interruption. For example, the leak caused a continuous flow of water. Continual, on the other hand, refers to something that occurs repeatedly, as in, he wept continually for several months after his mother died. Now, obviously, he didn't weep constantly for several months. He wept from time to time over those several months. The power of silent E is demonstrated in 2 words that sometimes cause confusion. Envelop, E-N-V-E-L-O-P, is a verb that means to surround or enclose, as in this sentence. The fog crept in and enveloped everything on shore. Now add a silent E and it becomes envelope, or envelope if you prefer, which can surround a letter or a bill. Adding an E to the beginning of a word can also make a difference, even if it's not a silent E. Take specially, for example. It's a simple word, the adverb form of the adjective special, and it means something like specifically. For example, the sweater was made specially for her. It can also mean in a special way, as in, I don't want to be treated specially. Now tack an E onto the front and you have especially, which has a slightly different meaning, more like particularly or unusually. Here are a couple of sentences. Everything was delicious, especially the dessert, and the team played especially well in the first half. We're in the realm of small differences where it's easy to make a mistake. Look at farther and further, for example. They have the same meaning, sort of, but not quite. The meaning is at a greater distance, but farther is used for actual physical distances. Mars is farther from the Earth than the Moon is, while further is used for figurative or symbolic distance. We should think about this further before we decide what to do. Let me quickly add that it's not really wrong to say Mars is farther from the Earth than the Moon is, but it's not quite right, and many people would frown at that sentence. I should note that further can be used in ways that farther cannot. It can be a verb that means to move something along, as in success in the negotiation helped to further her career. And it can also be used to mean additional. For example, do you have any further questions? Now we come to a couple of 4-letter words that are often confusing. I think partly because we tend to pronounce them the same, even though we shouldn't. I mean than, T-H-A-N, and then, T-H-E-N. The T-H-E-N version means at a certain time, as in back then I lived in Wisconsin, or we'll have to wait until then. THAN is used in comparisons. She is younger than I am, but she is older than my sister. I have to mention a frequent mistake that's become a pet peeve of mine. Writers using reticent when they mean reluctant. Reluctant means hesitant, as in he was reluctant to admit his mistake. Reticent means quiet or restrained. More specifically, it can mean reluctant to speak. For example, he is very reticent about his past, or the students were reticent about answering questions. But you shouldn't write something like he was reticent to admit his mistake. Here's another pair of RE words, rebut and refute. Again, they're similar but not the same. Rebut means to argue back. It comes from debating in law, where one side presents an argument and then the other side rebuts with an argument of its own. For example, someone argues that women shouldn't be allowed to vote. You rebut that by presenting reasons that they should have that right. Refute means to disprove. Suppose somebody claims that women got the right to vote in 1900. You can refute that by referring to the National Archives website showing that it happened in 1920. I've noticed that quite a few writers expect to eat dessert after the main course, which sounds much too sandy for me. Desert is spelled with one S. Dessert has two S's. Here's a way to remember. Desert has one S for sand. Dessert has two S's for sweet and sugary. Healthful and healthy are often treated as if they're synonyms, but they're not really. Healthful refers to something that contributes to good health. Healthy means having good health. In other words, if you eat healthful foods, you will probably be healthy. For an example of difference one little letter can make, I offer prescribe and proscribe, which are virtually opposites, even though they sound very much alike. Prescribe, which begins with PRE, means to forbid or ban. Prescribe, which begins with PRE, is used most often in connection with doctors who prescribe medicine for their patients. It can also mean to recommend, as in, if you're tired, I prescribe a good night's sleep. Proscribe with PRO means to forbid or ban. For example, the government proscribed public gatherings because of COVID-19. Some writers have a problem with formerly and formally, especially since they're pronounced almost exactly the same by most Massachusetts people. It helps to remember where these words come from. Formerly is the adverb form of former, meaning in the past. 5 former presidents are still alive. They were formerly presidents. Formally comes from formal, meaning something that follows established forms. If you are given a formal introduction to someone, you have been formally introduced. Fortunate and fortuitous are often mixed up. While the meanings are similar, they're not the same. Fortunate means having good luck or good fortune. If you're smart and good looking, you're fortunate. If you win the lottery, you're fortunate. Fortuitous describes something that happens by chance. Note that it can be good or bad. Winning the lottery is fortuitous, but so is getting struck by lightning. Okay, on to the next and final section. Don't get fancy. I noticed a long time ago, probably in junior high, but maybe even before that a lot of people tend to use too many big, complicated words when they write. By big words, I mean words that they would hardly ever use in normal conversation. It's as if when they sit down to write, they suddenly use a thesaurus instead of sticking to their normal vocabulary, and that's usually a mistake. An extreme example is the use of commence instead of begin or start, though I don't remember ever seeing that as an editor. But I do see writers using unnecessary substitutes for simple words like say and tell. For example, he informed us that dinner would be ready in a few minutes. She reported that it was almost 2 o'clock. Yeah, I know, inform and report aren't big words, but they are bigger than the words they're replacing, and more important, they have a formal sound that doesn't quite fit the circumstances. So let's change those sentences to read, he told me that dinner would be ready in a few minutes, and she said that it was almost 2 o'clock. Another one I see often is humorous instead of funny, as in, he told a very humorous story. Just a couple of weeks ago, I edited an article in which the writer actually used risible instead of funny. Here's a hint. If a word is likely to send some of your readers to the nearest dictionary, don't use it. Southeastern Advertising had several high-tech clients, and I frequently worked with engineers to develop ads, brochures, design guides, and white papers. I noticed that those engineers tended to write utilize instead of use. I guess maybe because it sounds more high-tech to utilize a screwdriver. But as an editor, I've seen far too many writers doing it, and they're not even engineers. Okay, just one more. This is an actual sentence from an article I edited a couple of weeks ago. It is situated on 20 acres adjacent to a railroad siding. I said one more, but that's a twofer. Change situated to located and adjacent to next. It is located on 20 acres next to a railroad siding. I could offer many more examples, but without going into great detail, I'll just list them quickly. Use buy instead of purchase. Use person instead of individual. Use keep instead of retain. Use now instead of currently. Use show instead of demonstrate. Use occur or happen instead of transpire. Use have instead of possess. Use need instead of require. Use seems instead of appears. Use later instead of subsequently. Use live instead of reside. Use stay instead of remain. Use have instead of possess. Use can instead of able to. Use simple to instead of in order to. Often it's more than just one word that creates a problem. Many writers tend to use roundabout phrasing instead of getting right to the point. They write sentences like this: I'm the kind of person who likes to laugh. As Thoreau wrote, simplify, simplify. Cut that 9-word sentence down to 4 words. I like to laugh. When you're finished writing something, read it aloud. If a word seems strange or awkward when you hear it spoken, you should probably replace it with something simpler. One final word of advice, and I do this with everything I write. When you think you've finished writing a piece, search for every sentence that begins with there. That's THERE. You can almost always streamline it. Not always, but I guess 9 times out of 10. For example, there was an old man sitting on a park bench. Change it to an old man was sitting on a park bench. And there is a dog barking outside my house should become a dog is barking outside my house. Okay, that's it for this session. I hope you've learned some things that you should avoid doing in the future.
I want to thank you all for your time this afternoon. This was a great session. I'd like to also thank Ralph once again for your hard work. Also, I would like to thank our funder, the City of New Bedford, for making this possible. Please be sure to visit our website at newbedfordcreative.org, newbedfordcreative.org, and join our free creative directory. This is the list we use to promote on our social media throughout the year. Make sure to add your events, galleries, exhibitions, or more to our calendar page that is linked to South Coast Today. We want our creatives to excel, and we are here to help. We have plenty of peer-to-peer sessions coming up. Please join us for our next session, Unveiling the Art of Project Development and Execution with Kat Knudsen on April 30th at 1 p.m. Thank you and have a great day.